What's going on, buddies? Jeff here. Welcome back to the channel. All right, guys, a quick video explaining what is happening at a macro level. Now, the market has been on a tear ever since we took a big bounce in the middle of March with no end in sight as of just yet. I want to talk a little bit about this calculations and talk about the CPI and where the Fed stands, just to give you a better idea of exactly where we're at and potentially what could be happening down the line for the rest of the year. So let's get right into it. First off, CPI comes out today, beating expectations by just a little bit, but down 20% compared to last month. And we're looking at this headline number right here, 4% year over year versus a 5% year over year, which is reported previously. And a lot of people are talking about on Twitter just saying, oh, it's manipulation and so forth, and that, it's not the real number. And it all has to do in their calculation, which, mind you, was recently changed. But the thing that I've been talking about for actually the past few months was everything was going to be focused on energy. And I'll break it down for you guys just a little bit further and then talk about what we might expect to see going on for the next coming, probably 6 to 18 months. All right. Now, I've maintained my stance, seeing that we are going to see a lot of turmoil for months to come. And the reason being is because I don't think that the rate hikes that have been done, we have seen those effects as of yet. Okay. Homes are still being purchased very quickly. Cars are still being purchased very quickly. Everywhere you look, there's spending, spending, spending. And that goes to show just by the revenue that some of these companies are reporting. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. But what I've talked about for a few months now was that energy was really going to help bring down this overall CPI number. And you can see that right here by looking at these three numbers over to the left. The energy sector overall was almost a negative 12% towards the CPI. Okay. So when you look at how this, consumer price index is calculated, you could take a look at all these categories right here, right? And they're all weighted differently. And you could see shelter, which is the biggest, almost 33%, food is 14%, and energy is about 7.5%. Okay. And because of the way that they changed the calculations, all right, they're only looking back for the previous 12 months. We saw a massive spike going through, this May and June of last year, where gasoline got up to over $5 a gallon. And right now we're sitting at about $3.60, $3.70 over the past few months. So when you take that massive difference, it's really going to bring down that headline CPI. Okay. And that's why you see this overall, the core CPI was about 5.3%, but your headline was 4%. And while other commodities are continuing to increase, including the biggest, okay, that people, Americans spend their money on, which is, food and shelter. Shelter's still at 8%. And food overall is at 6.7%. Okay. So you saw the energy sector really bring down that overall number. All right. Now, going forward, how does this look? Well, as you can see, as of right now, guys, oil prices are stabilizing, fuel prices are stabilizing, right? When we get to a point when we get away from this peak, we're not going to see that negative print come in for energy. It's going to probably come across at a stable. It might fluctuate positive, 2%, down 3%, and so forth, but we're not going to see that massive drawdown like we are seeing. We do still have one more month to go, because as you can see right here, this June 13 of 2022, which we have not seen, the print for, we're sitting at about $5 a gallon. Okay. So it's going to be a big decrease. We're really going to see that overall headline CPI number come down. Okay. So keep an eye out on that for the next few months. Like I said, I mentioned this probably at the beginning of the year, as we could see that, fuel prices stabilizing and so forth. Okay. And I will point this out to you before we get into a little bit of the Fed talk here is, when you look at shelter, which weights, as we just looked at, about 33%, it's really continuing to climb, right? You look all the way back into the end of 2022, 0.6 month over month, and we're still kind of hanging around that 0.6. We had a couple 0.8s, we had a 0.4, 0.7, but I would say that 0.6 is still baseline, and showing that 8% year over year is still going to stick. All right. So even if we do see the dip, okay, right now, the pullback that we're seeing in the energy, once that begins to just, cool down and slight a little bit, we might get the kickback where inflation starts to rise even even higher. Okay. So, like I said, guys, anytime something comes up and rapidly comes down, there's always a little bit of bounce back. All right. And so, while the same thing happened in the inverse effect when immediately, inflation came up and it did kind of dip a little bit before kind of making that final, push up all the way up to that 9%, we're starting to see a constant decline. And eventually we will get a little bit of a bounce going forward. All right. Now, as far as the FOMC, which is tomorrow, there is a 94% probability, which is priced into the market as of right now, that the Federal Reserve is not going to hike interest rates. It's going to stay between 5 and 5.25 as of right now. All right. Now that's already priced in. And guys, that's been priced in for months. Okay. If you take a look at this tool, it's been fairly accurate, especially over the last 6 months, where they're pegging it very, very closely. And what they're looking for is any hawkish tone from Jerome Powell. But I think as of right now, which I've said for quite some time, that this rate hikes, this inflation, it's not something that is new to the market. Okay, the market is very forward looking and wants to see what's going to happen, 9 months from now, right? And what they're going to start to look for is not only it's going to be where the Federal Reserve's stance is going to be going forward. Even though Jerome Powell has said numerous times they are not going to pivot, they still are pricing in that the Federal Reserve is going to pivot and interest rates are going to slowly come down. All right. So it's all eyes are going to be on exactly what he says tomorrow. But while you're still hearing some of this mumbo jumbo and this drama of the CPI, okay, and what's happened with the Federal Reserve, and yes, I listen to it all. I pay very close attention. All right, and it does obviously factor in my trades and my investments. You need to take a step back and understand that this is not a shock to the market any longer. Now, if Jerome Powell comes out and says, listen, we still have a long way to go, we expect inflation to spike a little bit, we're going to go up 1/4 percentage point, then you could see the market start to shake and rally a little bit. But as of right now, guys, you need to be able to just ride the trend no matter what your personal feelings are. Right now, I personally feel, like I said, we're going into a lot more turmoil, but you have seen a massive bullish trend and in no chance was I going to miss it. And the worst thing I'm not going to do is fight this trend. It is just a recipe for disaster. So guys, that's it for this video. See you in the next one.